first place to start is let's start in Egypt, in an area known as Kemet. That region today is what we think of as Giza. Now, this is not what we would consider the dynastic pharaohs of Egypt, such as Khufu. It's something that predated long before them. So in school, we're told that the Great Pyramid of Giza is known as the Pyramid of Khufu. But why are we told that? We're told that the reasons the pyramids were created was to be tombs for the pharaohs. And yet no pharaoh has ever been found in the pyramids of Giza. So why are we told that? It seems to me that when we're told the reasons for why these structures were created and who they were created by, allows us to not understand the truth behind it. If we were to actually look at the data, we would find out that nearly every pharaoh in Egypt was buried hundreds and hundreds of miles to the south of the Great Pyramids of Giza in a place called the Valley of the Kings. So then why are we told that they were built as tombs? It greatly takes away the reasoning behind why they were built. When we look at the Great Pyramid of Giza and the sophistication behind the more than 1 million blocks between 10 and 15 tons each that were created to build that structure, we think that it would just be easy for us to replicate today. And yet, there are certain star shafts that connect to alignments with Sirius and Orion that are perfectly aligned, but not in this time period we have. Because of the precession of the equinox, those pyramids were aligned to those star constellations well over 13,000 years ago, and as much as almost 40,000 years ago, if we look at a time period known as Zep Tepi, which means the very first time in Egypt. The very first time for what, though? Just like in the Fertile Crescent, like we talked about in the last episode, when those original pre-Diluvian cities were created, Zep Tepi represents when the first grand civilization of Egypt emerged, known as Kemet. That's when we are told that the Great Pyramids of Giza were built. Things like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. He states that he was part of building those pyramids. But how did they do that and have such sophistication with mathematical precision and star alignments? Something that we can't even replicate today. This goes to show you, furthermore, that the knowledge that they knew that was carried and passed down to them was lost more and more over time. And we think we're at the height of our sophistication now, but we don't even understand how they were able to build those structures today. The best evidence left behind by these incredible civilizations is not just found in these sophisticated pyramids and temples, but it's found in what are known as the megalithic structures of the world. Now, what does megalithic mean? It means large single stones, but not something in a crude manner like Stonehenge. That's often something that people get confused with. I'm not talking about simplistic monoliths. What we're talking about is highly advanced and sophisticated megalithic structures, mostly built out of granite, an extremely hard stone. But why is that important? One of the things that's greatly lost from our culture today in understanding why those blocks and why those remnants left behind are so significant is understanding what's known as the Mohs hardness scale. The Mohs hardness scale represents the hardness factor of a specific stone. And the reason that's important is that if you were told that that civilization that created that, he was using bronze and copper tools that are softer than the stone they're working with, it would have been impossible to manipulate them. That's why we know when we look at the specific hardness of these stones like granite, being a hardness on the Mohs scale of about a 7, we know that it would have been impossible for the civilizations that we're told in school to have created those structures. What does that mean? It means that the civilizations that created these places around the world that we're about to review had tools and sophistication that was far beyond the civilizations that could have ever created them, as we're told in our history books. So there seems to be two different events that are occurring in our solar system that are affecting the Earth and these civilizations. So does that mean these civilizations knew about these events? What we find when we look at ancient astronomical libraries, the best known being Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, is that these civilizations seem to be mapping the heavens for a specific cycle known as the precession of the equinox, in which the Earth wobbles on its axis to face different constellations. That entire cycle is known as the Great Year, which is 26,000 years, in which the Earth faces different constellations over a period of 2,100 years. But why were they mapping that? If you were to imagine how you were going to keep track of time as an ancient civilization, and you were facing different constellations every 2,100 years, you could predict when those events were going to occur, which means that enough knowledge was left behind by every previous civilization in order to warn the ones in the future. Let's review some of the evidence that proves that those events occurred, and we'll discuss what could be causing them and whether or not it's going to happen in our future. The first place to look, besides looking at the vitrification that's present on these megalithic blocks, is to check one of the most important records we have that can look back at ancient history to understand what the global temperatures were like and the environment on Earth. In order to do that, we have to look into some of the oldest ice caps in the world. The two most important of those ice caps are Greenland and Antarctica, in which we can take ice core samples and go down thousands and thousands of years of history, more than 20,000 years to 50,000 years in some cases. What scientists can do is drill down into these ancient ice caps in order to look at the ice and see what was present inside that ice at that time period. That gives us a snapshot into what the CO2 levels were and what the environment of the planet was like over the course of 20 to 50,000 years ago. And what they found was remarkable. Instead of having events happening randomly, we found a correlation of nearly every 13,000 years, as far back as we can go, that there seemed to be catastrophes that occurred on Earth. Something so severe that we're not just talking about one event, but a time period of over 1,000 years, where events would happen over and over again in different ways. Try to imagine the planet going through a cycle, where certain catastrophes would cause events to occur on the Earth that would be simultaneously so destructive that civilizations would rise up, become destroyed, and whatever remnants would survive would struggle to try to gain back the knowledge that they had. That's what we're looking at with these events.